If everything's working correctly here. To Henry Scheibner this morning, and he's going to tell us about his life.
Oh.
He began here in Stonington, and
in 1913.
1913.
Almost 1912, but I missed it by 5 days. Well, the first thing I can remember is probably, and this is a difficult thing to make people believe because I think I was a year and a half old when I remembered flags being draped over our house. And there's also a picture of the American velvet being draped. And this was because it was August 1914, and we had in Stonington at that time the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Stonington. And the parade that we had in Stonington was unbelievable. They not only marched all the way up to the Velvet Mill and went around the square that we have there. Since I was a member of the Velvet Mill gang, so-called, we had 3 crossings in those days, and if a train came along when the parade was partway over the crossing, it was just too bad because they had to stop everything and wait. However, it was a very yearly occurrence that I can remember that we always looked forward to as kids, and that was the parade that came around the whole village, meaning the borough, because the borough went up to the American Velvet. And every August, you would have the firemen, and boy, did they have beautiful uniforms in those days. I doubt if they have any now, but and they were all decked out, and they carted 3 of these old-fashioned fire pumpers, I guess, and God knows what else, even the hook and ladder. They'd hauled this all around the town at the time of the parade. It certainly was something we looked forward to every year.
It was always in August, near the 10th of August.
Around the Battle of Stonington anniversary, yes.
So that's why they have the fair today, that first week in August, too, they say.
Is that what they say? Well, that's very good.
Commemorate that look.
Yeah. Well, that's very nice. Well, this is something I don't remember, but my father came to Stonington around 1890, and with him he brought the first velvet loom to the American Velvet Company. He was an experienced velvet person from Germany, and I guess came over to this country probably a year or 2 before 1890, but he arrived in Stonington with the first loom on a tugboat. And the people in Stonington at that time built a plant, and they were known as the Stonington Building Company. And they rented that to the whim farmers. And this is when the operation first started, I would say around 1892. I'm not too positive about the exact date, but that was the year, and we had a 100th anniversary a couple of years ago.
Did your father work for the...
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I didn't realize that.
He worked there until his retirement, and so we had a continuous thing. He went out when I came in almost, not quite. There was a break. We did not overlap. No. However, I had an older brother who took care of that period between his retirement and my beginning, so we continued there all that
But
time.
you still are involved at the Velvet Mill through
Yes,
the foundation.
every once in a while I'm called in,
So you've been there 60 years
at least.
then.
Yeah.
So the factory was built by
The Stonington Building Company, yes. And, you
on
know,
the present location?
yes, the various citizens, I guess, in town in those days decided that this was an excellent spot because the railroad ended here and the Long Island boats to New York carried you the rest of the way. Well, from Boston to Stonington by rail and from Stonington to New York by boat. And this is one of the delights that I had as a young kid. Whenever my folks took me to New York, which was not too often, but they had friends down there in the city, and we went down occasionally, and I always liked going down the East River and seeing these toy trolley cars and trucks going over a bridge. Of course, they weren't toys at all, but it looked that way to me. And you left New London at midnight, and you got there probably around 7 or 8 in the morning after going down the Sound all night long. The purser on the boat happened to be the husband of my first grade teacher, namely a Mrs. Birch. I can remember them all, but I don't think we want to go through Stonington's grammar school in those days. Some of the people that I went to school with, of course, are still alive, but they're getting smaller and smaller all the time. Now, do you have any other? Are we still recording?
We're still recording.
All right. Well, then I better keep going.
Well, just to go back to the schooling, I don't know whether you realize that we received a tape from William Gillis. Does that name
Doesn't mean a
anything
thing.
to you?
Not
he
a
was
thing.
a teacher in Stonington and the principal of the Stonington High School in 1924. But you may have been out of the high school by that time.
I wasn't in the high school yet.
Right,
1924.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I only got there. I think in 27. Graduated in 31.
And then you went up to Bentley in
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
Right.
Was that a 2-year school at that time?
At that time,
A
you
business.
were able to do it in 2 years. Yeah. Well, it was a very odd school in those days, not what it is today, because they had professors from Boston College, Boston University rather, and even Harvard. We had a economics teacher from Harvard who a friend of mine who's about my age had at Harvard when he was there. So it was a makeshift
Visiting faculty.
visiting faculty, right. Moonlighters, I suppose you could call them.
Right.
And
Probably providing more of a practical education. An accounting,
yes,
an economics
Yeah.
professor would teach accounting to you.
no,
No?
economics,
Oh, you took the
Yeah.
economics.
yeah. And a psychology teacher would teach psychology. English teacher taught English. I mean, it was pretty well. It wasn't purely the typical business school in those days. Now, of course, it's a 4-year college. And hopefully they know more than we did when we got out.
So you tried,
So,
did you look for jobs in other areas?
oh, I went as far as Syracuse, New York, after getting out in 33, but these were the Depression years. So I came to work at American Velvet as the office boy, and got my first break in the mid-30s when the New York office, which was the main office in those days, we only had a number of people in the Stonington office then to take care of the payroll. After that period, I would have to say mid-30s, there was a chance for me to progress in the company, and I went to the New York office, which was the main office. At that point, I became the assistant financial man in our New York office, where I stayed until 1940, when we moved the main office to Stonington. Now, it was later on that Clarence Wimpheimer started the profit-sharing plan that we had, that we became more or less famous for. And I would say in the 60s, we went to England to manufacture because we could not export to the whole world because of the higher labor costs in America compared with England. And from that time on, I spent several weeks every year in our English plant, and it's still going strong and sometimes even better than we are to this time. However, we modernized it quite a bit when we first took it over. I couldn't tell you the exact dates when we bought it.
Where is it?
It's up in Yorkshire, not far from, well, it's in Denholm Clough, which the plant is really outside of the town, which is outside of Bradford. So that gives you a little idea. We would fly there to an airport called Leeds Bradford from London. And that became a very interesting and successful company. Now, there isn't an awful lot.
There is another plant. Is there another plant in the south?
Oh, yes. About, I would say around that same time, within 10 years of when we went to England, we also bought a small plant in Orange, Virginia, which we are now utilizing almost to the fullest extent, weaving, and we have to still bring the goods up to Stonington to dye and finish. But the reason that has picked up there, because we've owned it quite a few years, we didn't always utilize it to the fullest extent, is that the costs of doing business in Virginia are by far much lower than they are in Connecticut, which is probably one of the worst states in the Union for manufacturers. However, this is a sad tale,
But the roots of the company are here, so
yeah.
it continues. Now, you mentioned the dyeing and finishing. Can you explain a little bit about how they produce velvet?
Well, way back, we had to warp. We had to make our own warps, which would be, let's say, any number of threads on a large spool, about 6 feet wide, and God knows it could be 3,000 ends coming out there simultaneously from this warp. That would then go into a loom, which would weave it, and we would weave 2 pieces simultaneously, which means if you can visualize 2 toothbrushes face to face, and then somebody cuts the thing through the center, this all takes place on the loom. So the loom ends up with 2 pieces of velvet as we're weaving it. This is not the best explanation that I could think of, but I had time to go into it a little more detail and give it a little more thought. However, that was done in the days that I remember when I tried weaving on one of these looms with what we call picker. We had picker sticks, and it would throw a shuttle from one end of the loom across, and it would be caught by another stick, which would throw it back to the other one, and this would go on.
But this was all automated, not done by people.
No, the machine, the loom itself was electric at that time. And of course, prior to becoming electric, it would be done by a pulley on a overhead. But that goes back a very long time, before my time, really. And
it's, the dyeing is done here? Do all the plants do their own dyeing, or?
yes, I would say they do. Most of them. Keeping in mind that we didn't have, and certainly now we only have a couple of competitors in this country. In those days, we had Rossi Velvet in Mystic, and we had West Haven and New Haven, and there was even a plant in Shelton and Willimantic and Norwich. So Connecticut had a lot of velvet manufacturers in that period. Now we're the only ones left here in Connecticut.
What about in the Northeast? Are there other velvet manufacturers?
No. I would say probably we're the last of the Mohegans here. And I think the velvet plant in Norwich, as I remembered, went down to the Carolinas. Of course, we were invited to go too, but for some reason we stayed here. And
I understand that one of the primary markets for velvet is the inside of caskets.
that certainly was. Up to this time, we've done a very good business with Eastman Kodak to put the small amount of velvet that you'll have on a 35 millimeter cartridge for your 35 millimeter camera. Mm. But they have to sell an awful lot of those for us to sell a yard of velvet. Not very much goes on. But when you think of all the cartridges that they sold, it does amount to a good amount.
So you said up till this time, is that Kodak still a customer of yours? Or?
No, Kodak has now evidently they have some other ideas, so I have no idea what that will be like, since this has happened since my retirement. It's just one of those things that every company tries to figure out something a little better. And you have to remember, when I first went to work for the company, velvet was for people. They wore velvet as dresses, negligees, that sort of thing. And even Prince Albert coats used a little velvet, but that was not the kind of velvet that we make today, but we did make that kind back in those days.
What's the difference between the different kinds?
It's a heavy velvet, where ours is known as a transparent velvet, which is what we make today.
So what other uses are there besides the caskets and Kodak?
Well, I don't know. We sell, of course, we used to sell quite a bit to outfits like R.H. Macy, and they would sell the velvet as goods.
Yard
that
goods.
yard goods that you would make your own dress with, things of that nature.
And even movie houses had velvet curtains.
Yeah, but that is again a different type again.
That's the heavier.
That's heavier, a little than that sort of thing.
So is the velvet made primarily of cotton, or is it a synthetic fabric?
Oh, I would say mostly synthetic. Years ago, and when I first came in, we used a lot of silk, but the silk was in the back and rayon was in the face, which is maybe a little strange to think of, but this is the way it was constituted. Today, it's mostly rayon. Some cotton, yes. And I don't know if there is anything new developed, since I left, but it's the same type of velvet that we make in England, which is, of course, farmed out throughout the Far East, the Near East, and well, all over the world in general. I think England had many more outlets than any other country because they had dominions all over the world, and Canada included. So,
Now, the Windheimer Company have its own sales force, or?
oh yes, we have our own sales force in New York City. We're in the Empire State Building, have been for quite a few years. Although when I first went to work in the New York office, we were located across the street from the Metropolitan Opera House on Broadway and 39th Street. That's a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that your father had bought a loom in the 1890s, but
Brought it.
brought it over here from Germany.
No, from New York.
From New York.
Yeah, it came from Germany, of course, by steamship. But he came up from New York on a tugboat with it. A couple of looms, actually.
Was he an employee of the Windheimer family at that time?
Yes.
I
They first manufactured in Astoria, as far as I can remember, the talk, because that's what it was. I was not around at that time.
Right.
But they brought it up from what was a small mill down there. And don't forget, Stonington encouraged outfits like us to come to Stonington, because here they had the nucleus of what could have been one of the largest towns probably in the state. Only
It was the largest town in the state at one point.
Yeah.
In the census, I think as early as 1650.
Yeah, well, it was a
Certainly
nucleus.
had a transportation
Yeah,
nucleus.
right. And the minute, I guess, they decided that they could build a bridge over the Thames River, that ended the future of Stonington. And as I say, when I was a kid, we had to go from Stonington on trolley car to Groton. And Groton, we took the ferry and went over to New London, got on the Sound steamer on our way to New York. That was a nice trip. It's too bad it still doesn't run.
I think it would be. Yes, and Frankie Kane has talked about going to the beach over there in New London, about having to take the trolley car to get an outing at Ocean Beach.
Oh, yeah. Well, Ocean Beach, of course. Now I would say in my day, most of the traffic went to Atlantic Beach, which is in Rhode Island. The trolley car would go over, and it would be in the summer. Sunday schools had their picnics that way, annual. And you rode on an open trolley car. And you got into Westerly, and you it continued right along onto the Watch Hill line, and eventually left that and went over to the Atlantic Beach line. So there were a lot of trolley car lines crisscrossing all over. I know on my first trip to Europe at the age of 9, we went to New London by trolley car, and because we had to go up to Norwich for a passport in those days, we went up to Norwich from New London by trolley, and then came back from Norwich to Westerly by trolley and on to Stonington. So it was a good network of trolley cars.
A triangular route.
Yeah.
They would like to reactivate.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but I do know that you can see, if you go down from Norwich to Westerly, you can see where the old trolley car line at one time ran. You know, it had a straight line through the woods. And of course, from here to Westerly, the trolley car went through the woods. After you hit Wiggity Quack, it left what we know main artery and went over a bridge near the dump that we now have.
Well, Henry, the Wind Farmer Company has always been very involved in the community.
Yes.
And the Clarence Wind Farm, starting with Clarence Wind Farmer.
Yeah.
And now through the Wind Farmer Foundation. When was the foundation started?
Oh my. My guess would have to be in the 50s sometime. Yeah.
So, and they have been active supporters of the library and the community center, and they certainly have been a wonderful example for other
Yes,
industries.
definitely. And of course, as you know, we were instrumental in putting in an addition to this library.
To this library and to the Stonington Community Center.
Yes.
Evidently the gymnasium there, or the auditorium.
Yes.
And you played a part in that. So, have you been involved in the foundation aspect all the time, or just during your semi-retirement?
Oh, no, all the time, and also during my retirement. However, back in the days when we built the Stonington Community Center, the new building, I was also treasurer of the community center at that time. Well, I think I must have served for about a dozen years in that capacity. And that was the time when we were able to get land next to the old community center to build the tennis courts. And I don't know, I think probably I was the only one really interested in tennis at that time. But it eventually grew in popularity, so then much later on they built 2 more tennis courts.
Well, I'm sure there are many tennis players who would thank you, Henry, for being interested.
Yeah.
Way back. How long have you been playing tennis?
Well, this goes back, oh my God, around 1930, I would guess. But on very unusual courts. We even had one in the lot next to the American Velvet Company, where the past superintendent of the company lived. That goes way back. And it was a bumpy grass court, so I never played tennis on a good court until I got to New York. And then during the 30s, of course, I lived right off Columbia and was able to play on the courts that we had there. But there's always progress. And,
So when the weather warms up, are you planning on being on the courts again this year?
Hopefully, if my Achilles tendon heals, yes.
Achilles tendon heel.
Yeah. Well, you can see. Take a look at it.
No, you're all taped up there, yes.
Yeah. That's the way it goes.
That's a very vulnerable spot.
It certainly is. But I didn't get that on the tennis court. That's climbing a hill. I should never have moved to Mystic. See, that's a tough hill going up Baptist Hill. But I tried it once to my regret. And this always happens when you're walking on your toes for any length of time, which you do when you go uphill.
So tell me how many employees you have over there at the Velvet Mill now, and how many they employed at their peak.
Oh, at the peak, I would say probably well over 400. Now, I have no idea how many they employ right now, because we have had layoffs there in the last year or so. And, this is what, 1995 we're in now?
Right.
Yeah. Yes, I can remember the years in which it really ran well over 400, but you have to remember, in those days, the method of weaving was quite different than what it is today. And we did our own warping, so we had a warping
process.
Yes, well, in those days, we not only had a warping department, we had a winding department. Winding skeins in order to get them on spools. Things of this nature. Then we progressed to a point where we made our own warps on a very fast, high-speed warping machine, and eventually we bought our warp already made.
Well, who would supply the warp?
Well, I suppose you might say the manufacturer. North American Rayon is a good example of it. The warping department went on for quite some time. I can remember people who worked as a kid. I remember them walking to the mill. In those days, a lot of the people we employed came from Mystic, and they would walk up the hill on Bayview Avenue to where the trolley car stopped, and it would take them back to Mystic. I can vaguely remember when we put in an automobile shed, when autos became more or less prevalent, and people came to work by automobiles. But for the most part in those days, people walked to work. And I would say most of our employees actually came from the village of Stonington, whereas now most of them come from the westerly Rhode Island section. And a few of them, of course, from Mystic.
The companies have a pension plan for its employees, do they not?
Well, yes, that pension plan that we now have started in the years after we gave up what is known as a deferred profit sharing plan. And this is what the employees wanted at that time. I believe it probably was a mistake, but we then went to a pension plan. And of course now we have what is known as a 401k plan. And it's something that evolves over the years. Some years you'll have something that becomes very popular, and I think this is the most popular today, the 401k.
Deducted directly from the employees' wages and they're not taxed.
Right, exactly. They're not taxed on it, and then, of course, when they retire, they'll have hopefully a substantial amount in their plan.
Well, that part is self-funding. How much does the company
Well, the
match?
company also has a pension plan,
Uh-huh.
which we still have today in addition to that. And that the company pays for.
Oh, they have been very generous to their employees. And, I know there has been talk about moving the plant to the south or closing down this plant. I think that it would be a sad situation for not only employees but for the community and just for the image that this company has as one that took care of their employees and had a
Yeah,
paternalistic point of view long before that was prevalent in American business.
yeah, very true. However, life goes on, I guess, and there's not much we can do about it.
So as far as your memories of the community, we might have to talk another day and have you listen to Frankie Kane, as I said, Eppie York, who came here when he was probably 12, I think. Maybe younger than that. I think that Mr. York bought his property on the hill in 1915, so that
Yeah, I
he
wouldn't,
must have been younger.
I wouldn't remember anything of
But
that
he didn't
nature.
live here full time, as you really spent a lot of.
A lot
you
of
lived in
time.
New York, and you lived in New York, away from Stonington, because you lived in New York.
Mhm.
But you built a house. Did you build that house with your own sweat and blood?
Well, that was built originally for my wife's folks.
Uh-huh.
And yes, it was an experience. In those days, people were doing this. We at American Velvet gave any employee who wanted to build their own house the land on which to build it. All they had to pay for was the legal fee, which I think was something like $100 for the surveyor and the lawyer to make up a deed. And you can go back now to Island Road, which was where we owned a considerable amount of land. That all came with the mill. And
And Cheeseboro Lane?
Cheeseboro Lane is another place where you will find innumerable homes that were built by employees. And actually, I even helped some of those in their building, which gave me the encouragement to take a shot at it myself years later. It's probably took 10 years out of my life, but
Well, I don't think so,
as
Henry.
a pencil pusher, it certainly did, I think. You know,
Well,
that'd
it's a
be,
wonderful experience. So you built the whole thing from the ground up, did you?
well, you have to remember
You
there
have
are
the
certain
foundation.
things. The foundation is put in by a guy who does nothing else. He has plywood boards to make the forms with, and there was a guy by the name of Melvin who did some of the plumbing, even though I was an assistant plumber at one time. And I guess a number of people helped every now and then because you couldn't do it alone. You had to have somebody hold the 2x4s when you were putting up the framework. Although I can remember doing most of the nailing on the ground and then getting somebody to help raise the sidewalls up and then pin them. It was interesting, yes. But I can remember with regret sliding down the roof trying to shingle without the necessary support under me and at the same time hearing boats starting a race in the harbor and wishing the heck I was out there sailing, which is really what I like the most.
Well, your house is on the cove then, right?
Yes, the upper cove.
The upper cove.
Mm-hmm.
Were your children old enough to do any helping?
No, they were not. No.
I know. Do you have any sons? I know you have
No, two daughters.
two daughters.
Mm-hmm. One in Colorado and another in Georgia.
Oh.
So.
Well, one of them used to be more local, up in Boston or something, right?
Right. Yeah. She worked for the law school up there after she became a lawyer in Virginia, actually, for some time. So they both had varied experiences. And at one time, both of them lived in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
So your wife, Ann, was also a Stonington girl? Or
No.
she moved here?
She moved here with her family I imagine, right after the war.
Mm.
Yeah.
And you're not talking about the First World War?
No, I wasn't in that one. But I do think that she happened to be living in Boston at the time, and her folks, in order to be nearer, they came from the Midwest, not the far West. I think she was born in Albert Lee, Minnesota, of all places, but had lived in the Sioux, in Michigan, and I guess in Ohio for a while. So eventually he became the rector in Stonington, and that's when I got to know her in those days.
Well, you both had a interesting life and certainly have loved Stonington. Now, it's interesting to see that you come back here to get your papers at Frankie Kane's as if Stonington.
Well, you see, I remember when Frankie Kane came to Stonington, or he says he came from Broad Street rather, to live in a house on South Street, which is the mill section of Stonington. And this is when I got to know Frankie. And we had, even in those days, an Indian. I actually believe he was probably half Negro and half Indian. But that was the only colored person that we had when I was growing up in Stonington.
What did he do?
He left Stonington after his school time. His name was Charlie Gardner, and I understand he's long gone now, but he moved away after graduating from grammar school. And I haven't seen him since, of course. That goes back a long way. And then there were a number of people that we had around in those days. And I think we were known to some extent. We were not really a gang or anything, but we were known as the Velvet Mill Gang because we came from that section of Stonington.
So that's, Frankie said he also lived in the house that I think it's either Rowena Owens lived in or Isabel Baum lived in at one point. But you're saying that he lived over on South Street and was part of the... Did you live over there?
No, I lived on Bradley Street. In fact, I was born on Bradley Street and lived there for a good many years.
But...
In fact, I've written a book on Bradley Street and nothing else.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, is this Bradley Street, the have something to do with the man that had the trains over there?
No, but I
Okay.
wouldn't be surprised if his ancestors were responsible for the street being called that.
Where is Bradley Street?
Bradley Street is part of a square, so-called, that's bound by Bayview Avenue. Then you have Bradley Street, South Street, and Elihu Street. And that means it takes care of the whole square. This was a square that we used to use as a racetrack. We would run around that, and that'd be when we were kids, certainly. You have to remember, everything was dirt in those days. We had no paved roads around. And I think that went for most of Stonington. I can remember when they cemented Water Street, and this was a gift from a guy by the name of Whalen, who also left us Whalen's Dock, which later became Wharf. And then, of course, at the advent.
That was before the electrification then of the,
Well, it just started. I can remember kerosene lamps to study with.
well, yes, well, there were some lampposts, and a few of the houses in town still have some of the old lampposts.
Uh-huh.
They have been electrified.
Yeah, well,
So at that time when you were racing around Bradley Square, Frankie was chasing you,
no.
or you were chasing him?
No, well, Frankie, I would say, probably left at some point. He would be able to tell you that much better than I. And, we had any number of people. And every once in a while, I think somebody comes back to Stonington. One day I walked into Frankie's office, and who should be there but a girl that I remember at the 8th grade. She came from someplace in Massachusetts. Her name was Mildred Connolly. And I remember her very well because I had a crush on her, but never talked to her. But this was in the grammar school years. She left in the 8th grade, I think, to move away when her mother died. However, there were a lot of people that I remember in Stonington, and of course the mill section had a lot of people that also owned pianos. And one of the things I did as a little kid was to go up and down the streets in the summertime and sit on the curb and listen to people playing their piano.
Did you play?
Well, later on, yes. But every house seemed to have an old upright, and in the summertime they had the windows open, and they were all different kinds of players in those days, some good and some not so good.
Mudge, Eleanor Mudge, talked to me one day. Her father was the lighthouse keeper.
Oh,
She had moved down here from Providence and went to the high school. So you did go to the high school in the borough school.
oh yes, yeah.
And Eppie, but you knew Eppie, but he was only here during the summertime.
Yes, I never really knew Eppie well at all because of that fact. And remember, we did a lot of boating out of the area, which is at one time, well, it was called Davis's, but later owned by the Johnstones. But in my day as a little kid, we had a dock that was known as the German dock because they all got together and built this. This went out into deeper water and had a pier at the end. In those days, most everyone in the mill district had a rowboat. And this is where we went over the tracks.
Onto the land that is now where the Johnstone property was.
Yeah, right in front of the house, in fact. Down, if you can remember, there's something of what we called the big rock. It was a hump of rocks, a higher elevation, and there was a brook that ran actually out at that point. And it had a bridge. You had the road running over to the Johnstone property over a bridge. And that's where the people would bring their boats in the wintertime underneath the store on the marshland there during the winter.
Where was the bridge? Did it go over from the mill side or go over from?
Oh, no.
From East Grand Street?
That's East Grand Street Bridge, yeah.
Oh. Was it higher than it is now?
No, but on low tide there wasn't any trouble going under it. Not at high tide you couldn't, of course. But you would have to know the way the land was formed in those days to get an idea, but everybody kept their boats there, and I would guess as a kid that there would be 24 boats at least at moorings tied up along the marsh and along this dock. I think probably you had to pay a little to have your boat tied up to the dock. But in those days, there wasn't much else to do, you know.
Ride the trolley cars and go out.
No radios even. I can remember when the first radio came to our neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. And even the music that was on it, the Happiness Boys, Billy Jones and Ernie Hare, they're the interwoven pair. That's what they became later on.
Right, so you spent a lot of time outdoors.
That's true.
Playing ball and out on the water.
Right.
Fishing?
Fishing.
Did you do a lot of fishing?
Oh, yes, fishing. Sandy Point was a place we went to go swimming.
Frankie was talking about one time being down where Dodson's is now, when it was owned by somebody else, when there was an explosion and he was thrown into the water. Do you remember that?
No. No, I don't remember that.
Yes, he ended up being badly burned and he had to be in the bath. They soaked him in the bathtub for days, and if he hadn't jumped into the water, he would have been killed.
Yeah. Now, if that was where
he lived down there at the time.
At Dodson's dock? Yeah, well, there was another guy that owned that dock way back when we were young.
Much smaller, I'm sure. But you
Yeah.
always had a boat, a sailboat.
Oh,
primarily?
yes, always. Mm-hmm.
And you helped Ray Avila take his boat down to Florida, you said.
Well, we would do something like this. He would be, say, for instance, in Charleston, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. So he would have had somebody help him bring it up from Florida to that point. Mm-hmm. I would fly down to Charleston and help him bring the boat up to Great Bridge, which is Norfolk, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And then at one time I remember flying down to Norfolk and helping him bring the boat from Norfolk to Stonington. Mm-hmm. And this is nice. I think everybody should have a taste of the inland waterway once. I'm not so sure I'd want to do it again, but at least once, yes. It's an experience.
Ray had a lot of tastes of the inland waterway, I guess, and taking the boat back and forth
Yeah.
every year.
That's true.
Well,
But then he gave that up after a while, too.
Well, as he got older.
Yeah.
You keep in touch with him? He's in Louisville, Kentucky now,
He is in Louisville, Kentucky now during the winter, and he spent this past winter, he may still be there for all I know, not far from, well, Tampa, I think, Florida. So there's somebody he knows that owns a condominium, although he lived on the East Coast for a while.
In Jacksonville, yes.
Yeah, he had his own apartment there.
Well, he's an old salt.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I don't know what he's doing these days or what he intended to do. He had a lot of ideas and gave up on a lot of them, I guess.
Well, after his wife died, I think he sort of lost some of the winds in his sail. But no, his wife was from Louisville. So
yes, originally.
He felt that since he has no family, if he moved there, then her family would take care of him, and his sister, of course.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of other mill questions that I have.
A lot of things I couldn't think of either.
I have to do some research on some of the questions I should ask.
We should have had an agenda.
No, well, that's fine, and yet it's easier and more relaxing for somebody to
Because
have a conversational. We'll have to have another session.
this was much too spasmodic, really,
I think that's fine. We'll have another session when we have an agenda. You think about some agenda, and I will think about some agenda. As far as the mill and the Wimpheimer family. And do you think that Jack would be willing to talk about the Wimpheimer family and the mill?
Yeah, he probably would remember a lot of things quite differently than I would. And yes, I think you should ask him anyway.
Okay.
See what he has to say.
All right. Well, good. Thank you.
All right.
This is April 20th, 1995.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.